I'm Ritesh Yadav, and I'm a Global Goal Ambassador for SDG 8 Decent Work and Economic Growth at UNE USA, along with Lady T Thompson, who is also one of our speakers today. I'll be moderating today's event, so thank you so much for taking your precious time to be here. The title for today's event is Digital Decade of Development for Enterprises, where we will be discussing the importance of technology for small and medium enterprises in achieving economic growth as well as sustainability. Today, we have three speakers who have dedicated their work towards helping us achieve the Sustainable Development Goal. The first speaker we have is Dragan Radic. Dragan Radic is head of Small and Medium Enterprises Unit, SME of the International Labour Organization. Dragan began his ILO career in 2008 as Senior Specialist for Employers Activities. He was in charge of capacity building, of employers and business member organization in the area of advocacy, strategy development, and membership serving offerings in East Asia. In 2012, he moved to ILO's Central and Eastern European office, where his focus was capacity building of EMBOs in Central and Eastern Europe. In 2018, he took the position as head of SME Unit in ILO's headquarters in Geneva. Prior to joining the ILO, Dragan was Chief Executive Officer of Accuro Health Insurance in New Zealand and Business Services Manager of New Zealand Nurses Organization. He holds an MBA degree from New Zealand Massey University and honors degree in psychology from Croatia. Second, we have Mr. Lorenzo Tosini. Lorenzo Tosini is managing programs and projects. Next slide, please. Lorenzo Tosini is managing programs and projects on entrepreneurship and enterprise development in the investment and enterprise division of the United Nations Conference for Trade and Development, headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. Since 2005, he is in charge of technical assistant projects to promote entrepreneurship and support small and medium-sized enterprises in developing countries and economies in transition. He has been supervising UNCTAD's Empretech and Business Linkage program and has been coordinating a network of Empretech centers established in over 40 countries. Mr. Tosini has also been providing assistance to member states on the formulation of national strategies and policies to promote entrepreneurship, including targeted measures for young migrant and refugee entrepreneurship. Next slide, please. The third speaker we have is Lady T Thompson. Lady T Thompson is the principal of the international organization Agribis, and she also served as one of the Global Goals Ambassador for SDG 8 at UNA USA. Her work has been geared towards global advocacy for women's self-sufficiency, African diaspora inclusion, youth and women's empowerment, agriculture skill transfer, investment matchmaking for minority business enterprises, and gender equality. He facilitates USA and foreign investment, cooperative and international economic development. Her work has been recognized by former US President Obama for contribution towards doing business in Africa during Women's History Month. She has been honored and has received many prestigious national, international awards and accolades for her body of work spanning across 30 years and 14 countries. So as we all know, the past year has been rough for majority of people and business around the world. UN, as well as several organizations around the world, has been working for decades to achieve first the Millennium Development Goal by 2015 and then the Sustainable Development Goal by 2030. There had been a lot of progress where many lives were saved, many were lifted from poverty, and there was economic growth and progress in poor as well as least developed countries. But many of those progress has been negated and even reversed due to the pandemic. Without a doubt, we saw many small and medium enterprises close while the big ones flourished. Companies well equipped with digital and technical capabilities were some that felt least of the impact. Today, we will hear from our speaker on the importance of digital development for small, medium enterprises. As we move on, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We will be going through the questions as time permits. So before we begin, we have the first polling question for our participants today. The question is, how important is sustainability and digital decade to you? So feel free to select the answer. Once again, the question is how important is sustainability and digital decade to you? Please feel free to select the among the four choices: very important, important, neutral, and not important. Okay, so as we move on, first, so from the audience, we see that 61% of the audience members think that it's very important, and 33% think it's important, while 6% is neutral on the subject. In the spirit of the question, let us first hear from our first speaker, Dragan Radic, on how important is digital transformation and sustainability to the SDG mission. So Mr. Dragan Radic, please feel free to take over and begin.
Okay, thank you. Very good. So do you want me to answer the question first, or do you want me to go into the presentation, Ritesh? Sorry, just to be clear.
Yes, you can answer the question and then start your presentation.
Okay, okay, very good. Okay, so this is extremely good question, but also very challenging question, because if you look at the research, there is actually very limited number of assessments or research that focusing on that interrelations between digitalization and each dimension of sustainable development. I mean, we should not really discuss what comes first. I mean, sustainability overall is the end goal. Digitalization, in my view, could be a mean to an end, digital transformation, but not an end in itself. And you know, digitalization is great because it offers many solutions, and it could play an important role in different areas of environmental sustainability, for example, you know, waste management, pollution control, sustainable production, sustainable transport, and so on and so forth. On a bigger scale, also, digitalization can help a lot when it leads, for example, small businesses in particular to productivity increase, because without productivity increase, there is no scope and fiscal space, put it this way, to improve the working conditions of the workers, which is actually part of the SDG 8. And because the SDG 8 is also about this work. So digital transformation as a mean to sustainability is very important, but it's not the only thing. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Dragan. I totally agree with your subject, and moving on, we would like to really see your presentation now.
Okay, great. So let me just clarify a couple of things. So although your angle is of this webinar is on digitalization, as I understand, the ILO is presented here perhaps for the first time. So I was asked to give you a little bit, to give to participants a little bit bigger picture, which means explaining a little bit what the ILO is all about. And then really I would like to zoom in on what the ILO does for SMEs, because that is all linked to decent work and to sustainability, you know. So I think this makes sense as an introduction to your webinar. So next slide, please. So I lead, okay, so before I start, actually, the International Labour Organization. Yes, so this is specialized UN agency that was established a long time ago. We are the oldest one, actually, over 100 years old. And our mission is really achieving a social justice. We need in the world long-lasting peace, and we can't have it if we do not have social justice. If some people just take and don't share, we will never have it. So also vision is decent work for all. We are very unique UN agency. We are the only one that is tripartite. What does that mean? Because we are governed not only by the voice of governments, which we have 187 members, but also by representative voice of workers and employers, because in the world of work that makes sense, right? I mean, it's the government that regulates, and workers and employers are directly involved in this relationship. International Labour Organization is probably most known also as a standard setting body. We have international labor standards, as you know. They come in the forms of conventions and recommendations. And we have a number of other strategic objectives, such as promotion of social dialogue, promotion of the employment policy, promotion of occupational health and safety, skills development, entrepreneurship, and et cetera, et cetera. So that is very briefly on the ILO. Just to mention, maybe out of interest, then in 1969, we got a Nobel Prize as the UN agency for peace. I think that's quite actually neat. We were then, I think, 50 years old. So next slide, please. So then my role is to lead the work on the SME unit, and our mission, why we exist there, is really we are keen to support SMEs and micro firms to start a business and to grow their business sustainably and resiliently in order to create more and better jobs. That's what the ILO is interested in. You know, ultimate goal is creation of more and better jobs. And really, really small matters. That was my title of my presentation, because if you look at the data that we produced, the ILO in 2019, which is quite unique actually report, because we actually looked at completely different set of data. And we came up with a conclusion that 7 out of 10 jobs globally are to be found in small economic units, not SMEs, small economic units. That I mean by that, self-employed, micro and small firms only, up to 49 workforce. 7 out of 10 jobs. This is huge. That's why small matters, right? Most of these jobs, unfortunately, are actually informal jobs. And this is where we have biggest challenges. When we start talking about the SDGs and are we going to miss the target or not, we will miss the target, because we've got such a huge challenge ahead of us with these small firms that are really not productive and informal. 8 out of 10 are actually informal economic units. They are 3 times less productive than larger firms, and they pay about half of what the big firms will pay. Therefore, it's very hard then to attract skills workforce. And you know, that's why the whole chain of low productivity starts, and so on and so forth. We've got a team of around 140 people globally working on various issues that I'm going to now highlight. Next slide, please. So what are we working on? Where do we start? So we want to really start from the enabling environment for sustainable enterprises, because there is no point of actually promoting small businesses in the environment that is hostile to them. Many organizations work on enabling business environment, on good business environment, whatever you call it. Our angle is that we believe that our approach is quite unique because it is tripartite. So we bring on board, when we work on that, voice of workers and voice of employers around the table. We sit down with the relevant government officials. We look at what are the key drivers or constraints rather of the business growth, and then we develop action plan together with constituents, and we help them to implement this. Next slide, please. Usually what we see, our research shows the top challenges for small businesses are regulation is too complicated, can't follow it. You know, it's just so much over the top. Always usual suspect, access to finance. Can't get finances, so I have to self-finance, so I grow slowly, right? And the third one is access to skills. And no wonder, because I just mentioned in the previous slide that they pay half of what the big firms pay. So that is very, very challenging for the small businesses. So we've done this work in over 50 countries in the world, and we pushed for 54 various business reforms. So that's one team that focuses on this. For ILO, this is super important that we focus there, because that's where things start. Next slide, please. Then we go to interesting topic, and this is entrepreneurship. Why is ILO dealing with entrepreneurship? Because entrepreneurship is linked to job creation, right? You start a business, then hopefully you grow the business, then you become bigger, then you export. On the way you create jobs. We like to see that these jobs are decent jobs, so not any kind of jobs. So that is why this is important to us, okay? And we have a very, I would say, very well-known program called SIYB, Start and Improve Your Business. Why is it well-known? Next slide, please. You will see why. Because actually we track down what we do with this program. And so far, this program trained over 23 million people in the last 15 years. We have 65,000 trainers, and we operate in over 100 countries in the world. This is big, big network. And we think that around 9 million plus jobs have been created by entrepreneurs who went through this program. So that is basically our SIYB program. Next slide, please. We have a special line of product for women entrepreneurship, because we believe this area requires special attention, because women actually have a particular challenges when they're trying to open the business, when they're trying to run the business, for example, when it comes to collaterals, when it comes to family obligations, when it comes to simple plain discrimination, because they are just women, you know, it's very, very difficult. So we have a special offering for women entrepreneurship, where we provide help a service provider actually to provide the training to women how to start and grow their business. We work with providers. We work with providers in order to actually ensure that these providers can provide appropriate services and can recognize the needs of women. And finally, like banks, for example, and finally, we look at the business environment, because sometimes the business environment and regulation is not really in favor of women entrepreneurship. So we work on a number of countries to actually fix that. So that is our line of work. Next slide, please. And you can see basically that we operated in, it doesn't show here, but more than 30 countries. We've actually trained over 1 million of women, and we have nice stories to tell. And then we go to next focus for us, which is very important area. Next slide, please. And this is productivity. Without productivity is mean to an end. Okay, let's put it this way. But without productivity, not much happens. Business don't grow. Business isn't competitive. You can't actually pay workforce properly. You can't create decent working conditions. So for us, this is super important. And we have this global program that has been operating now for 10 years in 24 countries, which really is based on Japanese Kaizen methodology, where we come in the factory, we bring managers and workers on board, we create team, we train them in various modules, and then we help them to go through and improve the factories, and with that, improve the productivity. So you can see some results on the next slide. For example, can you go to next one, please? Yes, okay. So over 3,500 factories have gone through that, and we've seen that, I mean, you know, when we talk to businesses and their workers, 94% thought this was pretty good. This was really, really good. The productivity increases went up to 50%, labor turnover, absenteeism went down, and so on and so forth. So we obviously tracked all these on KPIs, because this project is funded by Swiss and Norwegians. So we actually have all KPIs that we report on. Next slide, please. Then, of course, the big elephant in the room, formalization. This is such a big and challenging topic in developing countries and in low-income countries. most of the employment actually is found in self-employment and micro firms, sometimes even 90%. You don't even sometimes have a almost formal employment. Unbelievable, right? So 2 billion people in the world are actually engaged in informality. And as I said, 8 out of 10 economic units are informal. So what do we do there? This is really tough cookie to crack. Next slide, please. So we sit down with the, can you go back? I think there was one slide before. Okay, maybe not, maybe I missed it. Okay, just go next slide, that's fine. Okay, so we sit down with the government and with social partners. We try to actually make formalization more attractive for the business. We try to simplify formalization. We try to offer carrots. What does that mean? Okay, so it's not difficult to formalize, but also when you do formalize, hey, there are some carrots for the businesses, like access to markets, access to information, access to finance, and also we actually, with government, we try to make informality less attractive. Also, there are some sticks on the way as well. So how we work, lots of studies, lots of diagnostics, of course, to understand, because you can't just cut and paste. Each country is different. Then we do capacity building, and we help constituents to understand how actually to go about enterprise formalization, what practices could be put in place, and various technical assistance in that area. And next slide, please. I'm just about done, don't worry. Value chain and market systems development. Now that's quite interesting and very innovative. That is really systematic approach. In every organization, you've got departments, and these departments are there to drive their agenda. So you've got employment department, enterprise department, skills department, and so on. So when we are talking about the problems of productivity, skills department would of course say it's skills. OSH department, occupational health and safety, would say, well, but it's also OSH. But we don't know really what it is. We can just guess. So with this work on market systems and value chain, this is really systemic approach where we look at really in particular subsector, we look at the whole value chain. We look at the regulatory framework and customs and rules and norms and support functions in order really to discover why we don't have productivity in this particular value chain, or why we don't have decent work. So we don't assume, we look at the root causes and then we try to address those causes. So that is this systemic approach that ILO is now pushing a lot, and we are putting in the heart of various new initiatives. And just to conclude, this was really, next slide, please. This is what I presented is what we are actually doing now, but where we are moving forward and how do we reflect the reality of today. One thing is SME resilience. We've seen what happened when COVID came. We've seen how many enterprises went out of business. Sure enough, with no matter what training you do, no matter how well you prepare SMEs, some would still go out of business. So nobody can provide bulletproof solutions, but at least we can try. And we have created now a global program, SURE, to actually build this SME resilience. I can talk about it later. Also, productivity ecosystem, completely new and innovative approach where we are saying you can't just train SMEs in productivity. You have to actually look at also the policy environment. You have to understand the sectors that they are operating in and particular challenges there, and then connect all these dots in macro, meso, and micro level in order to actually nail this down. Entrepreneurship ecosystem training is great. You've seen how many entrepreneurs we trained, but we need to address other things as well, right? Like a culture, for example, or regulatory framework. SMEs and just transition, this is all about environment. This is really important area, but not an easy one. We have to create a business case for SMEs to go green. They have to understand what's in it for them beyond being good Samaritan of the world, because these people run the business. They have to know that, and the government has to put real policies, good policies in place. And finally, digitalization. We've just launched a report in late June, Small Goes Digital. digital, and you guys will be talking a lot about digitalization. It's not all rosy. It's very, very difficult, particularly for micro and small firms. They are missing on digitalization opportunities a lot. So I'm gonna stop there. I didn't check my time, but maybe a little bit over, sorry, but okay, I'm here to actually chat and yeah, answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dragan. That was really informative about the work of ILO, and I'm definitely more interested to learn about some of the new things that you mentioned. Hopefully we'll have some more time to chat in the end. The next speaker that we have is Mr. Lorenzo Tosini. As I mentioned before, Mr. Lorenzo Tosini is Program Officer of Investment and Enterprise Division at United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. So continuing on from the previous the previous question that we're talking about on how important is the sustainability and digital decade to you. We'd really love to hear Mr. Lorenzo Tosini's thoughts and about his work experience working with small and medium enterprises, the challenges that lie ahead, and how he thinks it can help us progress the SDG mission. So Mr. Tosini, please.
Thank you. I hope can you hear me? Sorry, I cannot show my video. I'm using my phone at the moment. I had some issues with connecting my laptop to the Zoom meeting. I hope you wouldn't mind. And thanks for supporting me on sharing my slides. So let me start with just a few words about UNCTAD. Maybe on the next slide, I can show you a little bit about UNCTAD. UNCTAD stands for United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And we are a global body in the United Nations system, which deals with trade, investment, finance, technology, and sustainable development issues in an integrated manner. What do we do is basically established and decided by the General Assembly, United Nations General Assembly, and other bodies, including the quadrennial sessions of UNCTAD. They establish our mandate, they establish our priorities, areas of work, and outputs. And the next UNCTAD quadrennial session is going to take place next October in Barbados, virtually. For whom and with whom we do work. We have three main pillars, as you may see on the slide: research and analysis, intergovernmental consensus building, and then technical assistance and capacity building. Our emphasis is specifically on developing and least developed countries. They are our main clients. Next slides, please. The work on enterprise development is carried out within the enterprise branch of UNCTAD's division on investment and enterprise. The role played by UNCTAD in this respect has been recognized in the 5 most recent General Assembly resolutions from 2012 to 2020, and namely in the area of entrepreneurship education and dissemination of entrepreneurial thinking through our EMPROTEC program, as well as in the area of support and assistance to member states on entrepreneurship policy and MSME promotion. I've highlighted those parts in the General Assembly resolution, the latest one in December 2020. In the next slide, I'll show you also our relationship with, or the relationship between our work and the SDGs. As I said, we work with governments and policymakers, but we also do work with entrepreneurs and SME owners. We help member countries achieve targets under those 2 SDGs that you see on the screen. Number 4, quality education, and number 8, decent work and economic growth. So far, I've been mentioning MSMEs, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurship. Well, if you want to define MSMEs, it's basically a subset of all enterprises that are not large. And you do that by using two basic criteria, which are commonly and consistently used: the number of people employed by an enterprise and its turnover. For instance, in the US, you have an employment threshold to distinguish between large and not large enterprises, which is 500 employees. Above this threshold, you have a large firm. Below, the enterprise is considered an SME. Next slides, please. You may also find commonly accepted definitions of who is an entrepreneur, such as the one you see on the screen, which is pretty simple. A totally different scenario opens in front of your eyes if you Google the word entrepreneurship, for instance. A colleague of mine who has done extensive research on how entrepreneurship is defined and can then be measured claims that there are at least a few thousand different definitions used in economic papers and literature. And it is not just a matter of semantics. The way you understand and define entrepreneurship may have implications, of course, on how you conduct economic research, but also on how you draft policy recommendations. For our purposes at UNCTAD, we adopted the definition you see on the screen, which is centered around the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is an individual who is moved by intrinsic motives like passion, dreams, sense of achievement, but who may also be restrained by factors such as fear of failure or cultural perception. This is why in our policy work, we integrate and combine traditional elements of SME development policies with others that look into the actions of starting a business, expanding a business, but from the entrepreneur's point of view. Next slide, please. We need to make sure that public policies include measures for instance, raising awareness of entrepreneurship as a career option, generating and highlighting potential entrepreneurial opportunities, supporting individuals that assume the risk of starting a firm or commercializing knowledge, and helping those struggling to grow their firms gain access to necessary resources. UNCTAD's entrepreneurship policy framework and implementation guidance was developed as a practical tool for policymakers to design initiatives and measures, identify priorities, and monitor progress on the implementation of public actions to support entrepreneurship. Creating awareness, for instance, is crucial in improving entrepreneurial attitudes and put the seeds of an entrepreneurial culture in a large part of the population. Celebrating successful entrepreneurs through national recognition awards or featuring them as role models can be useful in improving the image of entrepreneurship as a good career option, especially in those countries where running a business is still seen as a last resort for those who cannot get a job. Clearly, there are certain public measures like education and skills development and awareness that are components of our entrepreneurship policy framework, which have the highest potential to induce cultural shifts in certain societies and communities. But unfortunately, measures that can cause such a deep change in societies take time to show results. If you start investing on a new education program now, you can expect to see results only in a generation time, which is a too long time for governments that are looking to the next election terms. In the slide that you see now on the screen, there are some details about other technical assistance programs in the area of SME development that we run at UNCTAD. Let me start from the third one you see from the left, the Business Facilitation Program. This program is based on a digital platform that helps governments use technology to simplify and automate public administration. In other words, it makes it easier to create a business, pay taxes, obtain import and export licenses, make social security contributions, process work and residence permits, and of course, access COVID rescue packages. The approach used in this program is to build the capacity of government staff to see procedures from the user's perspective, simplify them and place them online. This, in turn, help businesses formalize and grow, create jobs, support vulnerable communities, and help governments increase revenues. The other program, which is called ISAR, Corporate Transparency Accounting, the ISAR acronym stands for International Standards of Accounting and Reporting. Through this program, we assist member states to improve quality and international comparability of financial reporting and non-financial disclosures, such as environmental issues, corporate governance, corporate social responsibility. Last year, UNCTAD published a manual to measure and monitor the private sector contribution to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Its purpose is to improve quality and facilitate international comparability of companies' sustainability reports by integrating economic, environmental, social, and institutional indicators. The third and last program that I wanted to illustrate briefly here is actually the one I've been coordinating for the past 16 years. It is called EMPRETEC. Maybe we can move to the next slide, please, which is an acronym from two Spanish words, meaning entrepreneurs and technology. It started in Argentina in 1988, and it has been installed in over 40 countries, initially in Latin America and Africa, and more recently in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Its core product is a 6-day training workshop that helps participants discover, recognize, and apply a set of 10 entrepreneurial competencies and 30 associated behaviors. These competencies and behaviors were consistently observed and measured in different groups of successful entrepreneurs during studies conducted by Harvard University in the late 80s. No matter which business sector, country, or educational background, those successful entrepreneurs had something in common. And this commonality is actually the conscious use of those entrepreneurial competencies. Entrepreneurs will deliberately apply what they learned and practiced through an EMPRETEC workshop, have better performance in their businesses, and are more resilient to external shocks. As a consequence, they are better equipped to look for opportunities, seek information, taking calculated risks, persist, and make effective use of their networks to innovate and expand their businesses, even beyond their country borders. I've been privileged to eyewitness the transformation of several people who entered the workshop, the EMPRETEC workshop, just running a business, and who, after the workshop, began to make it grow. In most cases, they moved from being an entrepreneur by necessity to starting a new career as an entrepreneur by opportunity. This is such a rewarding feeling that makes me appreciate every single day what UNCTAD does to empower entrepreneurs and SMEs. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your answer to your questions, and clarification if you need. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lorenzo Tosini. It was a really informative presentation where we learned a lot about UNCTAD. The next speaker we have online is Lady T Thompson. So carrying on the conversation, Lady T Thompson, when we talk about SMEs, we cannot obviously ignore the importance of agriculture in sustaining these enterprises. With your experience, would you like to tell us about the importance, the challenges, and what we can do as an individual or as a group to help further the cause?
Yes, I will. And briefly, I'll go through my presentation, and at the end, I'll give you 5 things that each of us can do. Yes, every one of us. So Greetings, everyone. I am Lady T Thompson, a UNA Global Goals Ambassador, Women's Youth and Agribusiness Advocate, whose high points of advocacy underscores 3 pillars of sustainable development: social, economical, and environmental stakeholding. And guess what? Each one of you are stakeholders, and we're here today to help educate, inspire, and mobilize, all aligning with my personal mantra of the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so the United Nations 2030 Agenda is commonly known as the SDGs, or as the global goals, is the framework to create a better future for all. It's been said that the SDGs is the world's largest to-do list, operating to leave no one behind. Yes, no one behind. Next slide, please. So likewise, the 17 goals are inclusive of 5 pillars. And so I want to give you a quick snapshot, and that's the people, the planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. So aligning with forming capacity buildings in this last stretch of its inception from 2015, working toward the digital decade of development for enterprises. Micro, small, and medium-sized firms make up a large portion of every nation's economy. That's right, every nation's economy and gross domestic product in terms of productivity and employment. We've heard that from both of our wonderful speakers today. My advocacy has taught me that legacy is not something you leave behind, it's something that you lead. So we have to lead. It's a necessity to lead the people, the planet, prosperities, and partnerships, and peace, to have succinct awareness and for more formidable focus on the value of small, micro, and medium-sized firms in promoting innovation, creativity, achieving the movement of SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. Currently, the digital decade covers every business sector, that's right, every sector that uses products and services of digital providers to transform the way we go about our lives and or conduct business. Examples include virtual banks, digital media, and e-government services. So one example that I'd like to give today to help paint this picture between digitalization and agriculture and promoting inclusive and sustainable economic development and growth is aligning agribusiness with this picture. And that's because guess what? Everyone has to eat. That's right. So according to the Food and Agriculture Association of the United Nations, better, more secure, and varied jobs are urgently needed in rural areas where most of the world's poor live and work. Agriculture is the world's single largest employer. That's right, the largest employer in the world, especially in developing countries where it generates a sizable share of the GDP. Both the majority of workers, particularly youth, hold precarious and poorly paid jobs in the informal rural economy, a situation that often causes them to migrate to urban areas where labor markets are often already saturated. So food and agriculture can help solve the environmental challenge, the employment challenge. There is a large untapped reservoir of farm and non-farm employment opportunities in agriculture and beyond. In agri-food chains linked to sustainable agriculture, agribusiness development, and related support services. Consider another basic building blocks of this painting. It's a shape. The typical shape of the agricultural value chain has a smallholder farmer who needs inputs like financing to produce and then sell crops to, say, processors and or consumers. Presently, in this developmental era, there are small fractions of smallholders who can obtain financing through their mobile phones from digital financial services providers rather than physically visiting a bank. These digital financial services are able to access the risks of lending to farmers by building a profile using AI algorithms in conjunction with alternative data sets such as mobile phone usage and satellite farm imagery, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, there is an enormous, and I do mean an enormous room for improvement for services for smallholder farmers and non-served and underserved communities, for rural women and youth, indigenous populations, and cooperatives without land rights. So in my opinion, we are equally in dire need for MSMEs furthering value creation of innovation and supplementary digital applications that can help farmers produce better crops. Micro, small, and medium firms can provide solutions, services, products, apps, software, and or advisement on the best time for planting, soil quality, environmental waste, increasing yields, providing sustainable storage solutions, and dealing with pests. It means that a farmer no longer has to rely on face-to-face advice from friends and family or agro dealers, but rely on designs and fabrications that work. I hope you can envision the pain of how the digital decade of development impacts this segment of enterprises. Similarly, the digital labor expansion and usage make a far meaningful difference in efficiency and productivity than simply buying digital assets. In other words, for companies to compete in any industry, even if it's not in agriculture, they need to adopt a fully digital strategy, not just build a website. The media, IT, and financial industries lead the way across the board, while agriculture, construction, hospitality, healthcare, and government have room for more improvement. And then right in the middle, you have industries such as natural resources, transportation, retail, mining, and pharmaceuticals that are still solving problems and creating services or products for future advancement. So the question is, what can you do at the local level to predict the future with SDG 8? That's right, SDG 8. First, you can educate yourself on the SDGs. Next slide, please. So you can educate yourself on the SDGs and focus on sharing the sustainable production practices and resources with solopreneurs, micro, small, to medium businesses, municipalities, chambers of commerce, regional, statewide, and private sectors, and talk about all 17 of the SDGs and 169 associated targets. The second thing you can do is prioritize early education within your community aimed at agriculture, science, and technology to promote entrepreneurship, innovation, technology, advancement that's targeted to impact people, the planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. Third, you can identify and tackle policies and business practices that obstruct diversity and inclusion, productivity, and decent work with a living wage for every community. Fourth, you can advocate for a local culture of entrepreneurship to reduce unemployment in your community. Yes, your community. Fifth, and not last, but you can generate dialogues and action plans to invest in building, expanding, and upgrading existing infrastructures in technology, transportation, buildings, etc., to meet sustainable standards. So in conclusion, this is the time for legacy creation. Why? Because globally, women and children perish first, academically, mentally, nutritiously, psychologically, spiritually, and financially without economic growth within their communities. Remember, legacy is not something you leave behind, but something you lead. Now's the time for you to lead in our cause with SDG 8. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Lady T. That was a really informative presentation, and we definitely all got to learn about some things that we can do as an individual to help progress the SDG mission. Unfortunately, we are up on time. I'm pretty sure that we have a lot more to talk, but time is of value to every one of us over here. And with that, I would really like to end our today's webinar. Before leaving, I would like to go back to all of our speakers once again and just give them about 30 seconds for their final remark on the subject and if they have anything to say. So let's start with Dragan and Radic.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's a shame we don't have more time, but yes, time is of essence to everybody, so fair enough. Yeah, I think the challenge is such that it's so great that we have to change the modus operandi in the UN, you know, and we are trying to do that. And this is why you have one UN. And one UN is probably in its infancy. So to be frank, we need to learn more how to work with each other to actually achieve the greatest good for greatest people, right? Because, you know, sometimes even within the ILO, it's not easy to collaborate between departments. We are quite large organizations and so on. But the point is, if we do not challenge our own orthodoxies, if we do not challenge the way how we think, how we work, it's going to be extremely hard to actually achieve something bigger. You know, yes, we are achieving individual, each agency is creating lots of value, but I think we need to really get together genuinely to learn from each other and to partner rather than sometimes we compete, right? To actually partner together and to tackle SDGs because we're running behind. And small business is so important, but it's so way back. I mean, they have so much catching up to do. Yeah, that's from me. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Sir Dragan. I would like to go over to Mr. Lorenzo Tosini.
Yeah, thank you, Ritesh. I think I concur with what Dragan has just said. I think we need to work on three aspects. One is the role of the international organizations. With UN system, we are trying our best to work as one. We're trying to speak with one voice. We're trying to join forces to not waste time and resources, not to duplicate our work. And this is already a good step forward with respect to what has been happening so far. The second aspect that I wanted to emphasize is the role of the governments, of policymakers, in pushing strongly for the achievement of the SDGs. It's something that they have decided some time ago that they would have achieved in 20 years. So it's something that they need to keep committing to that goals. I think it's without the support of the governments, without the strong commitment of certain governments to move forward on the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, international organizations alone cannot do much. So we need to work together with governments, with the countries. And the third actor that I see extremely crucial for the achievement of SDGs is the private sector, and particularly the MSMEs, because of their not individual weight or size, but because of their critical mass, the role they play in, especially in job creation, in moving on with innovative ideas, creating the ecosystem where new ideas, startups are being generated. So this is actually the three actors that I see they need to work together in a more effective manner. And we really, with the work that we are doing, we are trying to put together all these three actors and work more effectively. So that's my final message or final remarks for that.
Thank you, Mr. Lorenzo. Lady T, did you have any final message for us? You are on mute.
My final words is, again, this is the time for legacy creation, and it starts with you. No one needs permission to lead and get involved. You are a stakeholder for sustainable development and the SDGs. Thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate each and every one that's here today.